Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage and Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will be splitting my time with my friend from Surrey Centre. And Madam Speaker, I'm deeply honoured to speak this afternoon in support of Bill C-91, the Indigenous Languages Act. I want to start by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional unceded lands of the Algonquin people. Our language is at the core of who we are as a people and as a community and as a nation.
Before talking about important parts of the bill, I'd like to explain the deeply entrenched challenges that I face as a first-generation immigrant to Canada. Every day I do my utmost to ensure that my two daughters understand and speak their first language, Tamil, at home.
Part of this community is at my core. The ability to understand this language allows me to understand this community. And I want my two children to be able to have the opportunity and the right to understand the language and be connected to the people. Like this, Madam Speaker, each family wants their language, be it English, French, Finnish, or Tamil, to be spoken and understood. It is who we are as a people. However, these languages are not at risk of extinction, nor are the speakers and keepers of these languages dying. Most Indigenous language speakers, however, don't have the privilege and protection that is available to the other languages in Canada. Sadly, Madam Speaker, the legacy of Indigenous people in Canada is one where each and every one of the 90 languages spoken here prior to colonization is at a threat of being lost. According to UNESCO, 75% of these languages are in danger of being extinct. Madam Speaker, imagine the languages, dialects, and the voices of many communities lost forever. I cannot fathom it. We cannot fathom it, and we cannot understand it. This happened because successive governments undertook the process of colonization that Madam Justice McLaughlin has called cultural genocide. This meant that the government took children from their homes and their communities to residential schools. The children were forbidden from speaking their language, practice their spirituality, and were often abused for practicing who they are. Some communities were forcefully moved from one geographical location to the other. Some children from Indigenous homes were taken and placed into foster homes or adoption through the 60s scoop. And we have a modern-day version of the 60s scoop where children are taken by child welfare agencies into foster care. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission report has outlined many experiences of residential school survivors and their experiences, and I want to just share two such stories. One is from William Herney, who is Mi'kmaq, who spoke with his brother at a residential school. And I quote, and she says, "What are you two boys doing?" "Nothing, sister." "Oh, yes, I heard you. You were talking that language, weren't you?" "Yes, sister. Come here," she said. I went over. She took a stick. She leaned me over to the bathtub, grabbed me by the neck, and I don't know how many whacks she gave me over my bum. And I was crying like I don't know what. Then she took a piece of soap and she washed my mouth in it. I can still even taste that eye soap. All my life I tasted that taste. And she said, "You don't talk that language here." That's a no, 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 you don't. You understand. Looks at me straight in the eye, she said, "Do you understand that?" And I said, "Yes, sister, understand." In an Anglican church in Carcross, Rose Dorothy Charlie said, "They took my language, they took it right out of my mouth. I never spoke it again. My mother asked me why you could hear me. She's like, I could teach you." I said, "No." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I'm tired of getting hit in the mouth. Tired of it. I'm just tired of it. That's all." Then I tried it. I went to Yukon College. I tried it. And then my own auntie laughed at me because I didn't say the words right. She laughed at me. So I quit. No more, I said. Then people bother me and say, how come you don't speak your language? And I say, you won't. The depth of the loss of Indigenous languages cannot be quantified. The eternal links to language and by extension, culture has been broken. Generations of Indigenous peoples in Canada have been shamed into losing their language and culture because of the policies and practices of successive Canadian governments and many institutions. A patchwork of programs and initiatives exist to support the preservation, protection, and revitalization of Indigenous languages. Langue ne partant pas toutes le même degré le risque d'extinction.
Not all languages share the same level of risk to extinction. Some have better chances at success than others, but this is relative. More must be done toward protecting, preserving, and revitalizing all Indigenous languages. Madam Speaker, we cannot correct the past. The past is the past. But we can and must change the trajectory of our future.
In this moment in time, the 42nd Parliament has made enormous strides in advancing equality, human rights, and Indigenous rights. In 2015, our government committed to implementing all 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Calls to action 13, 14, and 15 require the entrenchment of legislation and a framework that will ensure the protection, preservation, and revitalization of Indigenous languages. Our government adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and this past year, this House adopted Bill 262 to ensure that the laws of Canada are in harmony with UNDRIP. UNDRIP requires state parties to take effective measures to support Indigenous languages. In 1981, Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution enshrined a full box of rights to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Such rights include the right to language. Our Prime Minister affirmed that Canada would move forward on a nation-to-nation, Inuit-to-Crown, and government-to-government relationship based on the Recognition of Rights framework. Bill C-91 does this, and this year, as we mark the United Nations Year of Indigenous Languages, we bring this bill forward to change the trajectory of Indigenous languages and once and for all commit to ensuring the long-term protection, preservation, and revitalization of these languages. Permit me to outline some major features of Bill C-91, Madam Speaker. This bill was co-developed with the national Indigenous organizations, including the AFN, ITK, and the MNC. This bill offers a distinction-based approach to languages, that is, that it recognizes not all languages are in need of the same level of protection. It respects the principle of self-determination. It envisions a national framework and commission that will monitor and report on the progress made. Madam Speaker, let me offer one additional reason for the urgency in passing this legislation. 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit Prince George, British Columbia. I met members of the Claytonais Nation. There were 5 fluent speakers of the Claytonais dialect of Dakel. I met the chief and several members of his council, none of whom spoke the language, but all were striving to preserve the language itself. The loss of this language is imminent if a concerted effort is not made to preserve it. Last week, Mary Gucci, one of the native speakers, died. In marking her passing, the MP for Prince George Caribou said this of Elder Mary Gucci. Mary understood that words connect us to the past. Our words and our music are 2 of the foundations of the human experience. Without them, we have no past. Without them, we have no future. And without them, we have no awareness of who we may need to be. In closing, Madam Speaker, I want to conclude by recognizing the keepers and teachers of all Indigenous languages, like Elder Mary Gucci. Notwithstanding that so many Indigenous languages are endangered in Canada, the mere fact that so many of these languages still exist is to the brave unsung heroes who have worked so hard to protect, preserve these languages. Let's do it right by them. Let's do it right by the future generations. Let's just do this, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Comments,